In February, Vice President J.D. Vance shocked the European wokerati when he said this.
And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Well, actually, it's always the UK. Europe's never really had free speech the same way as we have. And it's no secret there is one free speech case in particular that's upset the Trump administration, that of Livia Tossici-Bolt. On Friday last week, Mrs. Tossici-Bolt was convicted of breaching an abortion clinic buffer zone after having held a sign reading, "Here if you want to talk." She has been given a 2-year conditional discharge and a savage order of cost of £20,000. Here's what she had to say.
This is a dark day for Great Britain. I was not protesting, nor did I harass, intimidate, or obstruct anyone. All I did was offering consensual conversation in a public space.
Well, I'm joined now by Livia Tossici-Bolt herself. Thank you very much for joining me. This is an absolutely brutal cost awards against you of £20,000 just for holding up a sign.
Yes, good evening. Certainly, completely unexpected. Also, the sentence was unexpected. I would never have thought that one could be convicted for offering consensual conversation in the UK.
And you didn't speak to anybody, you didn't approach anybody, you just stood there. This is essentially a thought crime for which you have been convicted.
Sorry, I didn't approach anybody. I was there to be approached, and I was approached by many local people from all walks of lives, from all ages, students, family, people who talked about their families, even invited me for a cup of tea, and they told me they would hope to see me in the next few days. But
do you think
not to be so?
Do you think this is because the pro-abortionists are so ashamed of what they're doing, they're so ashamed to be killing babies in this way, that they want to have no discussion about it? Because once people know what happens, that a life is being taken, sometimes brutally taken, they just want to close down all discussion.
Well, I cannot say what goes in their heads. Certainly there is a contradiction from the various narratives, from talking to many women, this in the past, before the buffer zone was in place. And many told me, well, it's just a bunch of cells. And that is a complete lie. And I think for anybody to receive information true information, in order to exercise informed consent is essential. And I believe that many women accessing abortion centers are not exercising informed consent. They are told lies. They are not told about consequences. They are not told about alternatives. And that's
to what extent,
freedom of speech.
Do you think that the people going are very vulnerable, they're in a very nervous state, and therefore even somebody standing outside could be intimidating them? Do you think there is an argument along those lines, that they're frightened and therefore seeing you there makes them even more nervous and is therefore unfair on potentially very vulnerable people?
Yes, certainly women are in a very delicate situation, they're vulnerable, but there is a whole narrative constructed about this intimidation and harassment. And I think offering peacefully information should be viewed as a positive way. Of course, if you put it in a negative light, people would get nervous, maybe. But we have talked I personally talked to women and couples, and with the gentleness. They are not nervous, in fact, they are grateful. There have been cases where the offer of a leaflet of information has been refused, and that's fine. One just goes away and is not at all insistent. And plus, I think, again, it's freedom of information here, freedom of speech. And to portray it as a detrimental, as attacking, as harassment, that's a construct that is based on lies.
And before you went there and stood there, did you know that you were potentially breaking the law? Were you deliberately taking that risk, or was it a shock to you when you were arrested?
Sorry, I think we are confusing a bit, but when I was there with the PSPO in place, this buffer zone in place in Bournemouth, I was not there to talk about abortion or approaching women. I was there simply with a sign, neutral sign, completely neutral sign, unrelated to abortion, here to talk if you want.
Right.
And the conversation I had were completely unrelated to abortion.
And so you had no intention of breaking the law?
Absolutely not.
All right.
Absolutely not. I studied, I pondered on all the points of the Bournemouth PSPO. This is not the national PSPO.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Livia. Thank you for joining me and becoming the poster girl for Donald Trump in his trade negotiations with the UK. With me now is Lorcan Price, the Irish barrister and legal counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom International, which has been supporting Livia's case. Lorcan, welcome back to the programme. Should people obey bad laws? What is our obligation to obey law even if we don't like it?
In Livia's case in particular, she was complying with the law as she saw it.
But not as the magistrates saw it.
Well, that's a matter that will have to be looked at now, and we have the magistrate's decision, and we're going to have to consider it very carefully. I cannot see how it's possible to decide that somebody standing offering a conversation could be engaged in an act of protest, which is prohibited by the buffer zone in Bournemouth. And we've reached, I think, a point of absurdity where we're saying effectively that near abortion facilities, there has to be a kind of a cordon sanitaire where nobody is allowed to express any view whatsoever for risk of running afoul of a very broadly framed law.
Okay, but if she were there saying just stop oil, she wouldn't have been arrested, would she?
She would not have been arrested, in my opinion, no.
So she was saying have a conversation. Everyone knew what that conversation was going to be about, didn't they? They didn't think it was going to be a conversation about the weather.
Well, this is the supposition that the judge made in her findings, that this judgment was tailored to the knowledge that Livia was a person who was opposed to abortion. And so the proposition really that the judgment hinges on is that her presence there offering a conversation because of her known views on abortion made her a protester and therefore in breach of the buffer zone, which is absurd, frankly.
But who would have known her views? I mean, you knew her views and Bournemouth Council knew her views. Would people going in for abortions have known her views?
Not necessarily, but of course it was council officials and those who work in the abortion facility that rang the council officials who knew of her views, and that was a matter of evidence in court.
But who are the protest orders concerned about? Are they concerned about the staff, or are they concerned about the women seeking abortions?
Well, they're so broadly framed that it can be anybody within the zone. So it's not necessarily somebody who is trying to access the clinic or a member of staff, any person, frankly. And so what we've created on the streets of our cities and towns are zones where you simply cannot express yourself for on abortion, but she didn't express herself on abortion. This is precisely the point. Because she was known to be somebody who was pro-life, it was assumed that she was there for abortion reasons.
But it was a fair assumption.
It was an assumption, though, that means we're in a position where, depending on what you're thinking at the time, and this is what we saw in Adam Smith Connor's case, or even the possibility of offering a conversation, you're kind of a known pro-lifer, and therefore you must be
But it is a true assumption, isn't it, that Livia wanted to have conversations about abortion rather than about the weather?
Livia is quite clear that she didn't want to breach the buffer zone. And so if it was a case that she was speaking about that issue, she had those conversations outside the buffer zone. And
Okay.
that was her evidence to court. So what they're saying is that she, ipso facto of who she is, cannot be in the buffer zone offering a conversation. And I think that's an absurd position for the law to reach. And this is exactly why our American friends are so puzzled and disgusted by it, frankly.
But should we obey the law, even if it's bad law, as a general principle?
Well, a lawyer is never going to tell you to disobey the law, as it were.
So let's come on to America then.
Yes.
So free trade or abortion buffer zones. Is it really right that a foreign country should tell us how to write our laws?
I think a country that we've had such a close and long-standing relationship with, like the United States, is entitled as an ally to raise an issue of concern. J.D. Vance, if you listen to his Munich speech, was very careful in how he couched it. He said it out of a place of deep concern rather than hostility or unnecessary criticism. And I think when a friend offers you advice, it should be something that you take under consideration.
And do you think, which I was saying to Livia, that the real reason they want these buffer zones is that the promoters of abortion, BPAS, the biggest baby killers in the country, are so ashamed of the wickedness of what they do that they feel nobody should discuss it, and that's why they want to stop free speech?
Women have changed their minds as a result of conversations with people in these zones. We do not, and I don't think Livia does or anyone that I've spoken to, agree with harassment or obstruction. They're counterproductive and it's totally unfair and unchristian. However, as a result of consensual conversations and even the offer of prayer or information, there are women who've decided to keep their children, and those children are alive today as a result of that. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
And this is really important, isn't it? Because had Northern Ireland had the abortion laws we've got in England, Wales and Scotland, there would be 100 and some odd thousand people who are alive today who would have been killed. And the numbers become really shocking when it's over an extended period.
That's certainly true. It cannot be denied that when you introduce abortion, the rate of abortion goes up. I saw that in my own country, in the Republic. It's true in Northern Ireland as well. And sadly, since 1967 in this country, we've had millions of lives ended as a result of abortion.
With 250,000 a year on the latest figures, when we've got, I mean, apart from the moral issue of the killing of babies and disabled babies being killed really right up to full term, we've got a shrinking population. We're not reaching replacement levels. So it's a serious demographic issue. It's
certainly that, and that's true across Europe. And it's a tragedy for everybody involved. It's a tragedy for women involved because many of them experience abortion regret, which is a real and quantifiable problem. And it's obviously a tragedy for the unborn child that is denied the opportunity of growing up and living a full life. What we should be trying to do is to minimize the number of abortions, and then ultimately my view is to eliminate entirely the law in relation to it. And that's the kind of work, frankly, that a lot of these volunteers have done over the years. They're not trying to blockade or obstruct or harass women. They're offering them the opportunity of information that they simply won't get inside the abortion facility.